My name is Terry. I turned 34 this year and own a ramen shop. 7 years ago, I left my white-collar job and decided to open a ramen shop. However, I quickly realized that the world isn't so easy that a complete novice can just open a ramen shop. Thinking that I needed to learn the authentic way from somewhere, I began contacting all the places I had noted down in my notebook over the years as delicious, asking them to teach me their techniques. Of course, most of them turned me down, saying they were too busy or didn't want to increase competition by sharing their techniques with a potential rival. But one day, I met a kind-hearted shop owner who allowed me to start my training in ramen making. Of course, since I was being trained, I worked almost for free while I was there. After the shop closed for the day, the owner would start teaching me the techniques from scratch. I couldn't have done this without the support of my wife. She suggested that it was better to save as much of the money I had earned during my white-collar worker days for the opening funds. Her family ran their own business, and there were many times when they couldn't make ends meet, feeling the strain of the situation. So, the notion that having money is always better was ingrained in us. She strongly believed that it was best to avoid debt as much as possible. For these reasons, I ended up causing my wife hardship for many years. However, it was fortunate that I started my training at the young age of 27, as it meant I could open my shop while I still had plenty of energy. All of this was possible thanks to my wife, Emily, who worked tirelessly morning and night for 5 years to support our household. However, perhaps due to the accumulated physical stress, Emily's health gradually declined, and her complexion worsened year by year. Her body was silently screaming for help. By that time, her menstrual cycle had stopped due to malnutrition. Though we had managed to open the shop, it was still not well known in the neighborhood, and everything was a groping process. I wanted to tell my physically weak wife not to overdo it, but the daily grind was so exhausting, and our frugal diet had begun to take its toll on my body too. It was impossible to sustain ourselves on a diet further reduced in meat and vegetables alone. The nutrition from just ramen broth and rice was insufficient. Our nutritionally poor diet slowly made our movements sluggish. Being aware of my physical condition, I didn't have the luxury to tell her to stop working. Despite all this, I couldn't continue being a white-collar worker and had to quit my job. For me, societal life was painful. Commuting to the same place at the same time every day, performing manualized work, and living within an organization. I continued enduring for the sake of maintaining our life with Emily. But once I had saved enough money, I decisively quit my job. I had discussed it with Emily beforehand, and to my surprise, she accepted it with a smile. Thanks to her, I was able to quit my job without much hesitation. Since I was training while working, I couldn't take on more work. Even though I knew my wife was exhausted, I had no choice but to continue relying on her kindness. Was it a punishment for what I had done? One day, Emily didn't wake up. That morning, I just thought she was sleeping in more than usual. However, my wife, Emily, who usually gets up on time, didn't wake up, not even after a long while. It was unusual for her, who never overslept. As the bedroom remained silent, a sense of dread slowly began to cloud my mind. Could it be she didn't set the alarm? But that too seemed unlikely for the always diligent Emily. "Hey, Emily, it's getting late. Time to get up, don't you think?" I peeked into the bedroom and called out to her, but Emily didn't move at all. This was strange. Normally, she'd respond with a sleepy gesture or sound. Realizing something was amiss, I rushed to her side to check her pulse. What? There's barely any pulse. It might have been panic that made me unable to detect Emily's pulse. No matter how many times I gently shook her shoulder or cheek, or how loudly I called her name, Emily didn't even flutter her eyelids. Realizing the gravity of the situation, I shakily reached for my phone and managed to call an ambulance. "Hello, my wife won't wake up. Please calm down." "Your wife won't wake up, you say? She's not responding to any stimuli or calls." "No, she's not. Even if I pat her cheek strongly or call her loudly, she doesn't move at all." The operator asked me various questions, and as I frantically answered, they immediately dispatched paramedics. I have little recollection of the time until we reached the hospital. I remember pleading with the paramedics, "Please, save my wife," and being told to calm down. Emily was immediately taken to the hospital for various tests. After undergoing CT and MRI scans, no significant abnormalities were found in her brain. She was diagnosed with an acute consciousness disorder of unknown cause. I felt deep despair, thinking there was no way to treat her. In a weak voice, I asked, "So, what are the chances of my wife regaining consciousness?" The doctor explained that since the cause is unknown, it's impossible to predict the duration of recovery. It depends on how her body responds to the medication. Normally, if someone loses consciousness and doesn't recover, it often indicates significant brain damage. So the unknown cause implied some hope for recovery. But being told that it's uncertain if she'll ever make a recovery, I was lost, wondering how long I should wait, or if I might never see her again. "Thank you," I said, and staggered out of the consultation room, where Emily's sister, who had come to support us, asked, "Are you okay?" Actually, Emily's relationship with her parents wasn't great, so even in such a situation, they left soon after realizing there was nothing they could do. I felt complicated about her parents' attitude. My parents were not overly concerned about their grown-up children, but they would rush over and worry excessively if something serious happened. Yet, Emily's parents left without even seeing her, knowing she might not wake up for a while. Emily was reluctant to discuss her relationship with her parents in detail, and her expression suggested she didn't want to talk about it, so I never pressed her, but I could sense it was a difficult situation. While holding on to these mixed feelings, I explained Emily's situation to her sister, Sarah, who had stayed with us. Sarah said, "We don't know how long this struggle will last, but you are her only support. So, please wait for her." As I nodded quietly, a little girl timidly appeared behind Sarah. "Hello, I'm May, Emily's niece." She introduced herself with a shy smile. After talking with Sarah for a while and parting ways, I was sitting alone on a bench in a corner of the hospital when May approached me stealthily. "Excuse me," she said, opening the purse slung over her shoulder and pulling out a brown envelope. "This is from Aunt Emily. She gave it to me a year ago. She told me to give it to you if something happened to her. She also said not to show this letter to anyone, especially not to her or your relatives or parents. She insisted it be read alone." I took the plain, tall brown envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you," I said, then quickly ran to my car in the hospital parking lot and shut the door. With shaking hands, careful not to tear the contents, I cautiously opened the envelope. Inside the featureless envelope were two wrinkled, thin, white sheets of paper. "To Terry," it began, and the letter read, "Terry, thank you for always caring for me so much. Since meeting you, for the first time, I've felt what it's like to care for someone and to be cared for. We first met in high school. Initially, I heard from other girls that you were shy around women, so I decided not to force conversation and kept my distance. We hardly interacted until we graduated from high school, but when you suddenly mustered the courage to talk to me, I felt ashamed for only caring about what others thought. The real you, I discovered, was simply unsure how to talk to women, a genuinely pure person. Every time we talked, I saw your kindness. You always praised my efforts, despite my clumsiness and lack of physical strength, saying, 'You're doing great, amazing.' I had never been told that before, so when you said it, I wondered, am I really amazing? I'm just trying to do ordinary things." Until then, my life was filled with criticism and condescension for my failures. People often told me, "You always miss school," or "You're not sick, you're just pretending to avoid hardships." I struggled to understand things, and when I got frustrated and vocal about it, even friends got angry with me. I always thought I was slow and socially inept. But you accepted me entirely. Ask any time if you don't understand. Everyone has weaknesses. Those who can't tolerate others' flaws are just intolerant, especially those unaware of their own shortcomings. Don't worry about past criticisms. They're just making others uncomfortable with their arrogance. You're truly admirable for not doing that. People might value efficiency and politeness, but that's not the only measure of worth. I prefer someone like you, who tries hard and lives earnestly, over those who mock others for being slower. When you said that, I felt acknowledged for the first time. I'll never forget that moment. Our closeness grew after we went to college and ended up working at the same part-time job. You always defended me when I was mistreated for my slowness or mistakes, saying the intolerant ones were to blame. You noticed my extra efforts to compensate for my shortcomings. I grew to love you deeply, but that made it harder to tell you something. The truth is, I never wanted children. Until now, we've been busy with setting up the shop and figuring out how to promote it. Our lives were full just getting by. I often told you my body wasn't ready for a baby due to the non-stop work. You seemed disappointed, but I was relieved. My parents don't love me. They often said harsh things, even though they chose to have me. Now I understand they were strict because they knew I had to survive in society alone. But as I grew older, every time I was unwell, they were obviously disappointed, as if they wanted to stay here again, and they assumed it was due to a lack of management skills and laziness. Society doesn't accept a fragile constitution and is cold to those who couldn't perform as expected. No matter how much I rested, my body couldn't handle the daily workload. I often thought I couldn't work full-time 5 days a week. You were the only one who never blamed me for that. But when you decided to quit your job and follow your dream, I was honestly scared. Working at night suited me somewhat, even though my body protested. But every time you talked about children, I wondered, can we handle that with our current living conditions? There'll be lovely moments, but I know it's not all rosy. What if our children are born with a personality that varies from what we had expected? What if they're always crying, throwing tantrums over nothing, and hard to console? What if they're born needing constant care? What if they seem physically healthy but can't integrate into society and remain withdrawn? Could I accept that without resentment? Could I avoid showing my disdain, especially when my child doesn't meet society's standards? I've been anxious about this since my body became capable of having a baby. Even when I'm with you, I fear this. I couldn't just stay silent if our child refused to leave their room all the time. I would definitely think they should go to school or at least finish compulsory education somehow. And if the child turned out to be extremely selfish or prone to anger, I think I couldn't bear it. I would wonder why they have such a character or wish to be away from a child who doesn't stop crying easily. I'm certain I don't have the physical or mental strength to face such challenges. I'm sorry for only thinking negatively before having a child, but I just couldn't find the resolve to face whatever kind of child we might have. Honestly, I have nothing but respect for mothers who raise challenging children, because I probably couldn't even tolerate the high-pitched crying of a child. Just the thought of such an unpleasant sound entering my life makes me feel terrible. Also, having been a child who couldn't do age-appropriate things like others and was shunned by my parents, it would be cruel to bring a child into the world who might be like me. Honestly, I struggled more with my abilities, needing to work harder than others to be average in studies and sports. I've often wondered why I was even born. So, I couldn't develop a positive image of having children. I couldn't tell you, even though you often happily mentioned wanting children someday. And though you were always busy, which lowered the chances of having a baby, I was actually taking contraceptive pills. So, even if we were intimate, there was no chance of having a baby. I used your hectic days as an excuse, saying I was going for checkups, but I was actually getting the medication prescribed. However, I was afraid of what would happen if you found the pills or learned about my intentions of not wanting pregnancy. That's why I decided to undergo tubal ligation. I lied to you. Instead of working the night shift, I sometimes worked at the nightclub and saved up for the surgery. I could quickly earn enough money for the surgery with my nightclub paycheck, and then falsely claimed it as my daily salary. The surgery was outpatient, so I managed to do it without you finding out. Since then, our shop and part-time work became busier, further reducing our communication, and I managed to carry on without you noticing my abdomen. But whenever I saw you looking enviously at grandparents with their grandchildren or young couples happily spending time with their children, my heart felt torn. So, I planned to take this secret to my grave. However, if I were to get cancer or some other illness and pass away before you, I thought it might be okay to tell you then. That's why I entrusted this letter to May. I'm sorry for intentionally straining my body to become less fertile, knowing how much you wanted a child, and for even being so selfish as to want to explain the real reason I couldn't fulfill your wish, even if it shocked you. But I couldn't keep it hidden anymore. And if, after my passing, the truth about the prescription receipts and such were to come out, I wanted to tell you through this letter before you got shocked by discovering I had hidden it from you. You often said you loved me because I was kind and pure-hearted, but that's not true. I'm always just coping with myself. I can get angry at people or say no just because I lack the ability. I have been at the bottom of society because of my physical weakness, low self-esteem, and lack of skills. In my past, there were countless occasions when I received harsh and painful words from strong-willed or impulsive people, and I can't let go of those memories. So what you see in me is just an image you created. The me whom you loved, who tried hard and was kind, is mostly a false image I created, thinking I had to be that way. I do have ugly thoughts and want to say no to things I dislike. I can't overlook something unpleasant just because it has some good aspects. Maybe part of me married you because I liked your face. So, if I'm gone or even if I survive, please stop looking for a kind, good person in me. That's everything I wanted to reveal to you. Don't stay with me just because you idealize women as kind, nurturing, and gentle. If that bothers you, let's separate. I'm sorry for deceiving you all this time. I don't believe everyone stands before others as they truly are. Most probably wear masks like me. But we've always avoided honest conversations. Maybe because we needed each other and didn't want to choose separation over minor disagreements. But does that really make us suitable as a couple who will live together for life? I now think about whether we're really in a relationship without trust. I'm sorry for being late to realize such simple and basic things. But I just couldn't bear the pressure anymore, from society's expectations or even from you. I'm really sorry. If there's a chance for me to live with you again, and if you will accept me for who I am, then maybe this time, I can breathe easily and live happily with you. From beginning to end, I've been nothing but selfish. If reading this makes you hate me, feel free to find someone new. Don't worry about me. Live your own life happily. But I've been happy until now. Thank you. In the letter, there were many of my wife's true feelings, but it ended with words of gratitude to me. As I finished reading the letter, my eyes grew hot and my face trembled. With a rush of emotion, I slammed a car door and hurried back to the hospital, eager to be by my wife's side. I closed the curtain. With cautious tenderness, I lifted her hospital gown to check her abdomen. There, I noticed a small surgical scar, a silent testament to the experiences she had endured. Emily had been suffering all along. She had always felt burdened by her inadequacies and the attitudes of others around her, finding it difficult to live a normal life. And all this time, I thought I had understood her well enough. I had been proud of myself and satisfied with my role as a supportive husband. Indeed, to Emily, who had always been oppressed, I might have seemed like the most reliable and trustworthy person. However, all I did was slightly and temporarily alleviate my wife's difficulty in living. In the end, every time she faced society, she felt the hardship. And the person who pushed her back into that difficult situation was none other than me. Had she not married me and remained single, she might have had to earn money for a living. Nevertheless, it wouldn't have been necessary for her to work to the point of exhaustion. It was my decision to start my own business that forced her into such relentless labor. Especially during lean periods, the need for her to work harder became even more pronounced. Considering her past struggles with part-time jobs, where she faced difficulty and disdain, she must have suffered greatly. Yet, in the end, I was a different person from my wife. Instead of considering her suffering, I prioritized my own dreams. While I said she didn't have to push herself, if my wife hadn't earned money, we would have likely suffered from malnutrition or been unable to use heating devices, which could have led to serious health issues. That's how marginal our ramen shop's earnings were at the time. Yet, I didn't choose to close the shop and find employment elsewhere. No, I didn't have any other option. Like my wife, I had my reasons for feeling uncomfortable belonging to the organization, as it caused me tremendous stress. In finding excuses for this, I was just as selfish in having my way. Maybe we should stay together, both being selfish in our ways. This time, it'll be me who spoils you as much as I can. Children, it doesn't matter. Yet, when I spoke of what I liked about Emily, I always praised the aspects she had worked hard to create. However, Emily and I never had a relationship where we could freely speak our minds without reservation. A relationship where we could casually joke around or share darker thoughts would undoubtedly be more comfortable for us to live together in the future. In fact, long-term relationships probably need such openness to prevent suffocation. While there are certainly people who don't express or prefer this kind of openness, Most people are ordinary folks who sometimes want to vent or complain. Somehow, I had imposed upon Emily the idea that she was someone who should never say such things. Despite her already living a life of struggle and pushing herself to her limits, I further damaged her body and spirit. It was only after reading her letter that I realized this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Emily. It's me who should apologize. There's nothing wrong with what you've said. I don't want anything that means losing your smile. I'm sorry for everything until now. Thinking this, I held Emily's hand tightly and kept stroking her shoulder as she lay there. Emily, I'm sorry for everything I have done. It was all my fault. I knew about your struggles, your hardships, and yet I only pursued my own desires. Returning to the organization and earning wages is challenging for me, but from now on, I'll make sure you don't have to suffer anymore. Please wake up. I continued to speak desperately, while May silently watched from behind. After that, I visited Emily every day, telling her repeatedly, you don't have to try so hard anymore. Live as you like. Just being yourself is enough. Just being yourself is enough, Emily. I repeated, continuing to stroke her hand. But even after 6 months, then a year, Emily didn't wake up, and the attending doctor said it was likely she would remain this way. Despite hearing this, I didn't get discouraged. It's true that recovery becomes increasingly difficult as the years pass without consciousness. But it's only been a year since Emily fell into this state. I'm not ready to give up. With this in mind, I continued to visit Emily every day, talking to her and stroking her hand. Meanwhile, I relentlessly focused on my ramen shop, constantly brainstorming ways to make it more successful. I wanted my ramen shop to be known nationwide. I yearned to proudly tell Emily that she no longer needs to work, to assure her of that comfort. Driven by this determination, I ventured into various promotional activities, experimenting and learning along the way. Initially uncertain where to begin, I researched other food establishments' websites to understand their PR strategies. Armed with this new knowledge, I decided to put everything into practice. I engaged in social media marketing, video uploads, participation in ramen and food events. Anything I could do, I did. As a result, customers who tried our ramen at these events began to spread the word about how delicious it was. This word of mouth slowly spread through social media and review sites, and within a few months of attending events, we started seeing a significant increase in customers. If this continued, I wouldn't need to ask Emily work for extra money anymore. Back when she lost consciousness, the shop was just starting, and managing its day-to-day operations was all-consuming. And this was the result. But now, things were different. I was doing this for my wife. With that thought, I continued to balance visiting Emily with running the ramen shop. 6 months later, Emily, it snowed today. Look, everything's covered in white. You always loved the snow. Once things settle down, let's play in the snow together. Though there was little I could do for the unresponsive Emily, every time I visited, I spoke to her, held her hand, and gave her massages to provide some stimulation. I'm off from the shop today, so I can stay longer. Sorry I can come by more often when it's busy. As I talked to her, I adjusted her hands and feet and changed her position as the nurses had taught me, then started massaging her legs. No swelling today. That's good. Yet, Emily remained motionless. It had been 1.5 years since she fell into this state, but she had not once grimaced or shown any sign of discomfort. She just lay there, quietly sleeping. Oh, how I miss seeing Emily's smile. I wish we could talk like before. There were many moments when such thoughts intensely welled up inside me, but I knew that being impatient wouldn't change anything. All I could do was to continue caring for Emily, ensuring she was in the best possible condition. With that in mind, I diligently massaged her hands and feet today, as I had done many times before. Then, a miracle happened. Emily's eyelids twitched slightly, almost imperceptibly. Emily. I called her name several times, and each time, her eyelids twitched more noticeably. Emily. Emily. Gripping her hand tightly and touching her cheek. I watched as Emily slowly began to open her eyes. For a while, she just stared blankly at the ceiling. Overwhelmed with emotion, I couldn't help but speak up. Emily, it's me. Do you hear my name? As I clung to her, Emily slowly opened her mouth and whispered, Terry. It was the first time she had spoken in a year and a half. Her voice was completely hoarse. "Emily, Emily, you've woken up," I said, embracing her gently. Gradually, the blankness in Emily's eyes gave way to a clearer, more focused gaze. As Emily's expression turned startled, she began, the letter. Are you talking about the letter? I'm sorry, Terry." She started to apologize, but I gently stopped her and smiled warmly at her. "No, I'm the one who should be sorry. I've been imposing an ideal image on you, praising you excessively. My behavior suppressed your genuine feelings and humanity. Listen, Emily, from now on, you can express any dark emotions or difficulties. Also, I'm sorry for making you work so hard despite your weak health. It's my fault. I'm the one who should apologize." As I said this, big tears rolled down Emily's cheeks. We embraced each other for a while, just quietly shedding tears. Since then, the ramen shop business improved even more, and I was able to hire a few employees. Emily occasionally helped at the shop, but she no longer worked tirelessly like before, heeding my insistence that she shouldn't overdo it. Now, she doesn't hesitate to say when she's tired and takes a break. Emily had always been cautious and pushed herself too hard, unable to rely on others. Perhaps losing consciousness was her way of protecting herself. Being given a second chance to make things right with her feels like nothing short of a miracle. Emily, I'm sorry for everything up until now. From now on, I'll put you first. I made this promise in my heart and devoted myself to work with renewed vigor.